Okay. So this is where we land up if we're somebody being coached by somebody in the organization. So the kind of setup that we have going is that everybody is typically a coach and a player, because we've got multiple layers of leadership that are being coached at one point in time, or at any point in time. So what we see here is a to-do list. This is the central part of the system that just makes life very simple for everybody. So if there's something that you need to do in your life, then there'll be an item for it in the to-do list, so you don't need to go hunting around for stuff. But if we have a look, if we take the coach's perspective and we click on my team space, which is where I find the people that I coach in my team, we see that there are two players. There's myself and Tekela Ranti, and we get some summary information about what's happening with the two of these players. So firstly, what the system's telling us is that it's been 32 days since Gary was coached and 36 days since Tekela was last observed, and 36 days since the last coaching session for Gary, and 151 days since Tekela was last coached. So that's not great. That's why those numbers are in red. We look at the last observation, the average score from the last observation. So Gary got a whole slew of zeros, and Tekela, his average score was 3 out of 5, with his lowest score being 1. None of these players have any open issues, and we can see what Gary and Tekela are busy working on in terms of the current coaching cycle. We see that Gary's working on customer experience, and Tekela is working on the connect part of the process. And Gary doesn't have any late feedbacks, but Tekela has 2. So what we're really trying to do here is just get a very simple view from the team leader's perspective as to what their team is up to. What we're replicating, the paradigm we're replicating here, is the coach standing on the side of the field watching his or her team practicing and playing. So we're just trying to give a team leader a high-level view of what each of their players is up to at a very high level. So what I want to do now is just take you through the basic process of how we go about coaching for improvement or coaching for performance, and hopefully all these numbers will make sense after I've done that. So I want to start you off. We have a very simple process that we go through. It's a 5-stage process. So it starts with observing. So before we can coach somebody, we need to observe what they're doing, and that process is there so that we can see what they're doing that's working and what's not working for them. Once we've done an observation, we then need to go into the next process, which is planning a coaching session. So in the Game On methodology, we're very big on planning for coaching sessions. We think that it's quite dangerous for coaches just to arrive in a coaching room and trying to run a coaching session off the cuff. What we find happens a lot there is that the coach typically lands up, due to lack of preparation, criticizing the player, and then they get into a whole defensive kind of story between the two of them, and that coaching session takes way longer than it should, and it doesn't produce any positive result. So planning is really important. Once the coach has produced a plan, they're then able to have the coaching session based on the plan that they've created. After the coaching session, the player needs to practice. So very, very core to the whole Game On coaching methodology is this idea of grooving simple skills by repetitively practicing something. So very, very similar to the way sports people go about developing competencies. Lots and lots of simple repetitive practice. And once we've gone through the practice cycle, we then land up at the next coaching session. And in the next coaching session, we have a review of the previous coaching session and the practice in between to see, has the player actually improved the skill or the skills that they were looking to improve. So that's a 5-step process, which, as you can imagine, happens on different, that can be spread out over more than a week between those different steps. So I just want to take you through the start of the process, which is the observation process. And what we recommend that that team leaders and operations managers and so on do is they at least do a full observation of their team once a month, so that we can get an overall sense of what our teams are competency-wise, what our teams are good at doing, and what they're maybe needing to improve. So the first thing we need to do is select a game that we want to observe. So let's observe inbound calls. So this game is designed for a call center environment where they're receiving inbound calls and providing service to customers who are calling in. So the first thing we need to do is just create a reference to the event that we've observed. Typically, the event would have come out of the QA system. So let's put a reference to the QA system, which might be something like that, so that we can pick up the call that we listen to, and we can also capture multiple calls. When did this event we're evaluating take place? Was the goal of the call achieved? That's a reference to FCR. So what we're not looking to do is to coach this aspect. All we're trying to do is get a sense of what kind of calls we're actually basing our evaluations on. And then were there any compliance conditions not met on the call? So were there any risk areas that we need to look at? Let's just say no. Then what was the interaction time of the call? Let's say it was 5 minutes. And what was the ideal interaction time? So what we're trying to harvest here is experienced people making a judgment of how long they think this call could have ideally have taken. So let's say, well, maybe this call really should have been wrapped up, and it's quite common, in 3 minutes, if there hadn't been a misunderstanding between the agent and the customer. Obviously, we've got reporting in the background that's able to now start bringing out reporting based on the calls we're listening to see what kinds of or how many minutes could we be taking off our calls ideally. Then we look at evaluating our players' performance or our agents' performance. What we've done is we've broken the call structure up into a number of key components that need to be worked through pretty much on every single call. So on every single call, we need to connect with the customer. We then need to clarify what they need. We need to then set the call agenda. We then need to resolve their query, essentially execute the call agenda. Then once we've done that, we need to wrap up and say goodbye. And then we've got some other behavioral stuff, which we call show up right, which is about the person doing things like sitting up straight in their chair and smiling while they talk and those kinds of things. So what we're able to do is to evaluate our agent simply by doing this kind of process. So we're scoring out of 5. This is a deviation from many QA systems who choose to operate on a yes/no scenario. We need this 1 to 5 score so that we can get some gray area going. And in that gray area, because that's where great customer experiences are, and from a coaching perspective, we also need to have a sense of progression rather than just either they're doing it or not doing it from a compliance perspective. So here we have our performance areas sorted out. What we also have, which support performance, we call them support skills. So performance areas are things that you can observe on every single call. They're relevant to every single call, whereas support skills are the more generalized skills or more generalized competencies that a player needs to have in order to support customers. So if we have a look, so the way we've designed this is that if on listening to a few calls, you pick up that one of your agents or this agent that we're evaluating is just unsure about a certain area of our business or lacking in a particular area of knowledge, we're able to identify that. Yeah, so let's say this person's unclear about how EFT and ATM payments work as they're done by each bank. And that's all that showed up on this call. We then go to the summary and we see all the stuff that we've done so far. And then if we're happy with that, we can commit this observation, meaning that we can no longer change it, and it's now part of the company record. So that's a process that, so hopefully you've got an idea from that of what we call a game plan, which is a plan of how you will achieve the result that you're looking for on every single call. What we're now going to do is just have a look at the coaches process, where a coach has listened to a few calls, and we designed this feature I'm going to show you for coaches or team leaders who are very time constrained. So they've listened to a call or two, they've got a very clear idea of where they're wanting to coach, and they're wanting to go straight to that place. So they don't want to go through the whole long process of doing the whole observation. So we'll pick the same game again, just so you can see the similarity. So here you see the same performance areas that we looked at in the observation, except we now don't have to deal with them in detail, and the same support skills that we look at. So if we maybe just pick up, let's do the connect process, and let's say we wanting to watch. In fact, let's just go back. Ways to pay, which is what we did last time. We click next, and now we get just a very focused set of skills that we need to worry about. So in the connect state, there are two skills that the agent needs to be good at. Matching the customer's color, which is about matching the customer's emotional state. And let's say, well, they're doing that fine, but this other skill here, which is confirming the customer's goal and teaming up with them, that's not going so good at all. So we want to coach that. And the other thing we want to do is do something about this EFT and ATM payment story, which the agent was unclear about. We click next. And we're right at the end of the process. We get to one of the few areas in the system where there's actual typing. And we try to avoid typing as much as possible. So what's Gary doing that's working in the connect area? So let's just put in okay, so please excuse my typing. I did not attend the School of Touch Typing. What we're doing, as you can imagine, is we're starting the kind of sandwich approach here. So let's focus on what you're doing well in this performance area. And then the next question is not what are you doing badly, but what could Gary do differently next time? And here we need to put the team leader or the person who's going to be doing the coaching into a creative place rather than a critical place where they're just looking at what's wrong. Rather, they need to apply their creative mind to what could this person do differently next time to get a better result. So, but there we go. So the greeting is very friendly and engaging. What would work better is to make a note of what the customer needs in 8 words or less, and then confirm that summary with them. And why it's important is essentially what we're doing here is looking for a teaching opportunity. We're trying to generate the basic principle. And let's just do this on ways to pay. Okay. And now we're done. So our learning practically around this is that if team leaders do this work, or coaches, whoever they are, do this work up front, as you can see, you're probably in for listening to the call, however long your average call time is, plus going through this coaching planning process will add another 5 minutes. But what we're finding is that coaching sessions, if they're properly prepared, can be done very, very successfully in 20 minutes. Instead of the normal hour that's happening. And what we notice is that there's a lot of arguing and defensiveness going on in coaching sessions as the player who's feeling criticized is actually trying to defend themselves, and no coaching is actually happening. So now that we've produced a coaching plan, we know what we want to focus on, and we know where we want to lead the player forward in the behavior that's going to work for them. We get into the actual coaching session. So we've got the plan. We're now going to coach the plan. So we've designed this to be used in the coaching session as an aid to the coaching session. Works best on a tablet because the tablet doesn't create a barrier between the coachee and the coach, but it works very well on a laptop or on a PC that might be in the room. So we just firstly put the date of the coaching session. We then need to link back to the previous coaching session that we had and make sure that we're picking up whether what we spoke about, what the person was working on, what they were practicing to improve their skills, and whether that's actually happened or not. So as you can see, I've typed a bit of gibberish in here in my previous coaching session, but that would be the notes that we made. You'll see those again in a little bit. So you get the narrative view of what's happening. The skill this player was working on was on the greeting, and we had a practice for them around drawing a tone line and pauses next to the words in the greeting and tracing it with their finger in each call. They found that moderately helpful, 2.5 out of 5, and their confidence on the skill as they rated it is now 3. They were also doing some stuff around content genres. They had to read some stuff. They found it moderately helpful, and their completeness, they didn't complete either of these tasks, so they only did 26% of one and 46% of the other. So maybe it's a bit of a hard conversation there. Once we've gone through reviewing the previous coaching session, we then go back to re-rate the skills that the person was working on. So generous, they're now 3 and 4, and from a reporting perspective, what we're now going to get is our reporting is going to start showing us how effective our coaching is. Are we seeing an improvement in the skills that we choose to coach? Okay, the next thing we look at is a backup for the reality phase of the coaching process. So we use the normal to grow process where the coach actually brings the agenda rather than the player setting the agenda for themselves. So in the reality phase of the grow process, we have a look. Here's our feedback if we want a refresher on that. But ideally, in the reality phase, we don't want to be telling the person that we're coaching about what they're doing and not doing. We rather want them to discover that for themselves. So here we've got a facility to explore what's happening in the Connect area and look at some options. And what we see is we've got some very specific awareness questions that we can ask the player that will help them to discover what the reality of their performance is in this area, so they can actually discover it for themselves. So what was the need that the customer had that they couldn't solve themselves? What did this customer lost that they wanted your help to give them back, and so on. These are in addition to 4 standard coaching questions some very broad coaching questions that we offer in the reality phase. What we then see as we move out of reality, when we start looking at options for what can you do to improve your performance, or what can you do differently to get a better result, they might come up with a whole bunch of ideas. And in the practice areas, we start moving towards the wrap-up. Because our coaching methodology is very heavily based on grooving skills into the player's subconscious so they don't forget them, also so that those skills can be rolled out almost on autopilot without the player experiencing any effort around that. We've got 2 practice drills that are already in the system. One of them is jotting down the bottom line as soon as you figure it out. So as soon as you figure out what the bottom line is, what the customer wants on this call, you write that down, and that's the 8 words or less, and put a big tick next to the bottom line when you've invited your customer and joining you to fix it. So what I understand, Mr. Customer, you need is blah, 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 and are you ready to get stuck in fixing that? If you want to put your own practice in there, if you agree your own practice with your player, you can put that in. Let's just put some notation here. And what we do is we monitor these practice drills that are captured, these custom practice drills, and we look for best practice. And if we find something that's really working, we will roll that out to the rest of the call center to coach as a standard practice drill. So the theme is, if you find something that's working, push it out to everybody as soon as you can. For the support skills that we found were lacking, working with customers around paying with EFT or ATM, we see that there are 3 resources available to us to sort the skill out. One of them is reading Chapter 9 of the onboarding manual or EFT brief. Let's say the EFT brief is going to work the best for us, and we're done with that. And now, as we move into the wrap-up phase of the coaching session, we're now agreeing, so when can we check in with one another to see whether these practices are actually helping you or not? So let's just pick today's date. You can pick a number of dates, and on these dates, the system will send a reminder email to the person and ask them for feedback, which I'll show you in a moment. We just need to look at how long the coaching session was, how many minutes, so we can keep a track of how much coaching time we're spending and what works for us. And then we send it to our player for approval. So the intention here is to create an approved or agreed coaching record between player and coach. So because of coaching, I'm just going to click on my space. We're going to see the full record of our discussion. So we get to see what was working in the reality, what we agreed to practice, what I agreed to read, and when I agreed to give feedback. If I'm happy with that, I can approve it. If I'm not happy, I can send it back for review. Let's just approve it to keep things simple. And then what we see as soon as we approve it, we see that our to-do list now has an item in it called give feedback on our coaching practices. And here we see the feedback form, which is very quick and easy. All we're really looking for and what we're replicating here is coach standing on the side of the field, having just given his team or her team something to practice, and now seeing whether that practice is actually helping the team. So we're wanting to find out, are you finding this drill helpful? What's your level of skill on this? Let's say it's really early days still, so let's not be overconfident here. This EFT brief you were going to read, have you done anything about that yet, since it was only 2 minutes ago? Let's say, well, yep, I went and I found it, but I haven't read it yet. And what I saw of it looks like it's going to be helpful, but I'm still have no confidence around that because I haven't done anything yet. And then we complete. So as you can see, it's a very, very quick process of getting the player to provide feedback. What we're also doing through this process is working the accountability muscle, so that the agreements that I make in a coaching session, nobody forgets about them, that they are going to be reviewed in the next coaching session, and I'm going to be prompted for feedback to see how I'm doing. You can also tell by the way the questions are phrased, we're really interested to see, is this working for you? Because if it's not, we really need to make a change. So this is not about you complying with stuff you're being told to do, but rather doing things that are going to be helpful to you.